Alright guys, Murphs here, and today we're going to do part 3 of my obscure, obsolete, and niche shotgun cartridge discussion series. Now, if you're just coming in at part 3, you should of course go ahead and check out the links in the description to part 1 and part 2. Today we're going to be picking up past 20 gauge. Now, one of the important things we're going to go ahead and get out of the way, which if you had seen my video on shotgun shell terminology, you'd already be ahead of the game, which if you're just interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in the description. Gauge is I'm not going to go into the full discussion on how it is that we determine gauge, but it is important to note that as we go down in number in terms of gauge, we go up in cartridge size. So the larger the number, the smaller the cartridge. That's going to play a big portion because a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is not normally associated in the terms of gauge. However, based on how the cartridge is designed, we can determine gauge. And that'll make more sense as we go along here. We're going to start off with the 24 gauge. The 24 gauge was produced for some H&R single shot shotguns, which a lot of this information, guys, by the way, is coming from my Cartridges of the World 13th edition, which honestly I need to go back in and update my library because it's been a long time since I got a new Cartridge of the World book. So we're kind of going through their assessment of what cartridges I haven't covered yet. Their order. There might be more shotgun shells that are in these bracketed areas that I haven't discussed, and if I come across those in the future, I'll do dedicated cartridge discussion videos on those. Right now, the 24 gauge was supposedly produced in the early 2000s. I have never encountered a 24 gauge shotgun shell, never seen a box of it sitting on a shelf, nor have I ever encountered a 24 gauge shotgun. Now, one of the important things to note in this case is though I spend a lot of time in gun shops, pawn shops, and the like, I'm not necessarily scouting for single-shot shotguns. I have a single-shot shotgun. I have a Hamilton Richardson Partner SB10 10-gauge shotgun. However, that's the only single-shot shotgun I have, and I really don't care to add any others to the collection. They just don't do anything for me. So I don't necessarily pay attention to single-shot shotguns. I very well could have bumped shoulders with quite a few 24-gauge shotguns and not even known it. This would come in a 2.5-inch as well as a 2-inch chambering. Sorry, guys, I got some notes down here because there's a lot of numbers, a lot of details that I was having trouble kind of keeping straight as I was rehearsing this week. All right, from here we go to the 55 Maynard, which, if you saw the previous video, you heard me talk about the 64 Maynard. This is the same type of setup. So this was a combination gun. You would have either a rifle or shotgun barrel. This was something that was very popular in the, well, popular is in quotations. This is an innovation that came out in the 1860s, and it did not necessarily take off as well as a lot of other firearms designs would. This would come in a 2 1/4, 2 3/8, and 2 5/16 inch length loads, which those are very specific numbers. It's very odd to me that it's so specific. And honestly, just like I said with the 64 Maynard, this sounds like it's some sort of car designed in 1955 by Chevy. I'm imagining just this really big, long, wide body sedan or something along those lines. But nope, it's a cartridge. This would be brass cased. I think one of the supposed benefits would be that it would be reloadable, which is great if you're, living out on your own in the boonies and you want to be able to maintain your own ammunition. But it obviously didn't go over very well. Now, it is important to note that the 55 Maynard is gauge-wise the same as the 28 gauge. Now, we will not discuss the 28 gauge, just like our conversation's also going to take us through 410, and we're not going to discuss that either. Those are still very common current cartridges, and at some point, I will do dedicated cartridge discussion videos on those. Ah, yeah, that's quite good. All right. From there, we go to the 32 gauge. Now, the 32 gauge would be available in the United States up until the early 1900s. It would actually be produced in the 1886 Winchester lever-action rifle, which I guess at that point we made that the 1886 Winchester lever-action shotgun. You would be able to find it in both birdshot and a slug round, and it would come in a 2.5-inch loading. Again, supposedly this is something that was recently produced as well, yet I have never seen a box of it anywhere. So I don't know where the 32 gauges are hiding out at. From here, we start to get into pest control cartridges. And this is where our designations also get very funky, starting off with the 11.15 by 52 millimeter. This is at the upper end of our pest control cartridges. This was something that if you took a lot of consideration into the ethics of your shot. You could still hunt like rabbits, maybe squirrels, though I think you might have difficulty getting at a squirrel with this type of cartridge. You would still be able to use it for those types of purposes, but it would be better suited for killing rabbits in the garden, like very close shots. This would correlate to a 55 gauge. From here we go to the 44XL. What I find really interesting about the 44XL is that it has a construction that's very similar to a modern CCI 44 Magnum birdshot load. So the modern CCI load is, of course, an aluminum cartridge casing with a plastic translucent tip filled with rat shot. And that's really what it's meant to do, is to kill like rats in the barn and stuff like that. Or maybe snakes or something along those lines. The 44XL was a brass cartridge casing with a paper container at the end of it that held your birdshot. And it would come in a 1 9/16 inch length, produced for both single shot shotguns as well as double barrels. Excuse me, guys. I'm finally getting over the drainage from this cold. Like earlier this week, my voice was completely toast for other reasons, but this cold has not helped. But my ear is finally drained. I'm feeling so much better now. All right. Next up is the 360 Centerfire, which would come in a 1 3/4 inch loading and would be a 99 gauge. Now, this would be kind of the, how do I want to say this? This is more or less a 9mm loading, which we're going to have a couple of those to talk about here in a minute. Pest control, we're getting further into the realm of like, this is better off going after like rats and snakes than it is necessarily trying to take game. From there, we go to the 9.1 by 40mm shotgun shell, which would be a European loading. Kind of getting up there with like the 9mm Flowbart and stuff like that. This would be a 101 gauge if we were to put it into those terms. It's important, of course, to note that this type of, these garden guns are still potentially dangerous. Like anything that is propelled by propellant is inherently dangerous. It may not necessarily be something that you want to defend yourself with if you have better options available, but if you had to, you could still kill or maim someone if you so desired. All right, from here we go to the 9mm Rimfire and Centerfire. This would actually be an American cartridge. The Rimfire would be brass cased. The Centerfire would be able to be found in a paper hull. This would be a 1 9/16 inch length. It would correlate to 105 gauge. 20,000 Winchester Model 36s would be produced, chambered in this cartridge, and then production would stop. It was a very short production run, never really reassumed, and it was only in the 9mm Centerfire. So not a whole lot of those bouncing around. As it turns out, I don't think Americans have that much interest in small gauges, only good for killing pests in the garden. From here, we go to the 32 Rimfire, which was produced by, I believe it was Savage, but I'll correct it down below if I was wrong, number 20 favorite single-shot shotgun. This would be a 1 7/32 length and would correlate to 142 gauge. So now we're getting into these Rimfire shotgun shells, which I bet you a lot of you out there didn't even know that shotgun shells could be Rimfire. Shotgun shells have been produced in every form of self-contained cartridge option that has been out there. Pin fires, needle guns, all that kind of stuff. 310 Remington. This is actually a very interesting loading. This was meant for a mini skeet game, as well as training like Boy Scouts and stuff like that. So this would be a 1 1/16 inch length cartridge casing. Really having trouble with this. The cartridge itself was produced between 1963 and 1966, and the Remington Model 572 was chambered in this particular cartridge, though we commonly associate that with a 22 LR. From here we go to the 7mm, of which I don't have a whole lot of information. Once again, it's a garden gun, very small chambering. It's a 223 gauge and would come in a 1 1/4 inch length cartridge case. Now, the 6mm loading. My book didn't have a whole lot of information about the 6mm shotgun shell, but when I looked it up, I actually found that Turkey is producing, a Turkish company is presently producing a 6mm shotgun shell. It's either for dedicated 6mm shotguns, or you can also buy a sleeve adapter that you can install in a 9mm shotgun if you wanted to, for some reason, shoot a weaker cartridge out of it. I don't understand why you would be like, oh no, this 9mm is too much, I must have a 6mm. This cartridge is really interesting. It's referred to as, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, the pipette, though the spelling looks different than what I would commonly associate with the spelling of pipette. And the only propellant in this cartridge is the 209 shotgun primer. It's basically a straw with a 209 shotgun primer in one end and shot in the other. And this is very interesting because that makes it very similar to like a lot of the small caliber Calibri cartridges we've discussed previously here on the channel, in which those cartridges were just had their projectile only propelled by the primer compound. Keep in mind, guys, primer compound is actually surprisingly strong, especially when it is that you're talking about a 209 shotgun primer. Like there's a fair amount of primer compound in there. It's a significant amount. Now, of course, this is an incredibly short range option, and once again, you're only killing pests with any amount of certainty. Now our final topic, and that's a 353 gauge, by the way. Now our final topic is the 20 caliber Wingo. This was meant for Wingo shooting galleries, which would go to like carnivals and stuff like that. No different than the air-powered shooting guns we have at carnivals here today. At one point, again, those like Calibri cartridges and stuff like that were popular for carnival type games or gallery type games. This would be a 581 gauge, and this was very similar to a 22 rimfire. However, dimensionally they are different in order to not be able to be chambered in a 22 rimfire. And it's very interesting to me that at one time this was so common in practice to have this very reduced load gallery gun that was still shooting propellant. It wasn't shooting compressed air or anything along those lines. It was utilizing explosives in order to be able to send a projectile downrange. And it fascinates me that this was happening in the 70s. Now, of course, this is coming from a time period where we start to get the idea of like, maybe we should have seatbelts be standard in cars. Maybe kids should wear bike helmets whenever it is that they're running around on their bikes. Some of you should probably wear bike helmets more often than that. And it's very funny to me because like I hear like my parents just talk about this type of stuff all the time. Like, oh, well, I just don't know how all of us survived then. When it's like, well, Mom, because a lot of you didn't. That's a crazy idea. Did you ever consider that? Now, I do have to say that my current ideas on safety do kind of change a little bit whenever it is that I'm like walking through the grocery store and somebody's like taking up the whole aisle and slowly pushing their cart, or somebody's ripping past me at 100 miles an hour on the highway, weaving in and out of traffic. I become significantly less invested in safety protocols at that point. I actually hope those people go blind. So perhaps I'm a little finicky when it comes to that type of thing, but it blows my mind to believe that in society at one point it's acceptable to have explosively propelled ammunition discharged in crowded areas. Because once again, guys, yes, a 20 caliber Wingo is not a terribly large cartridge. Like this is, we're talking about an even smaller 22. That is still potentially hazardous to somebody. You could still seriously injure someone with that type of load, if not kill them. Like paintballs still kill people. BB guns will still mess somebody up. Like all that type of stuff can happen. And it's amazing how quickly society can forget how dangerous things truly are. All right, guys, I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting. That's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.